Since the beginning of the tough love rehabilitation movements in the 70s, there have been over 200 facilities all over the world housing thousands of children. They are under no governmental regulation, and there have been over 40 reported deaths in these camps. Not to mention the hundreds of young lives ruined. In the middle of the night, two men burst into a bedroom and dragged Danny out against his will after handcuffing him. His parents are waiting outside and Danny asks for help, but they tell him it's for his own good. The next day, Sophie goes to a store to return a product because of a scratch and starts making a scene by throwing things around. The employee Ben drags Sophie to a corner as if about to scold her. But he actually kisses her. They're a couple and Sophie had just been pranking him. Meanwhile, at a club, Jack keeps consuming happy powder and walking on the ceiling beams without a care. However, it gets serious when he realizes he's bleeding. When Sophie goes home, she finds her mother Marianne and her stepfather Carl entertaining very important guests. Sophie crashes their little meeting, calling all politicians corrupt as she reveals a joint. Carl has been searching her room. But when Sophie tries to complain about it, Marianne drags her away while Carl announces that she's out of strikes. Later, Sophie and Ben attend a party and ignore a sign saying "Don't go past this point, to go upstairs." While they smoke and kiss, Sophie asks Ben to marry her so she can live away from her parents, but Ben just laughs and blames it on the joints because they aren't even 18 yet. Suddenly, some men burst into the room and announce they have parental permission to take Sophie away. Ben is dragged into another room and tied up while Sophie tries to fight back. But the men inject her with a sedative to put her to sleep. Afterward, Ben goes to Sophie's house to demand an explanation. But Carl says that Sophie is away where no one can see her for a year. Marianne claims that Sophie was destroying the family, and Carl threatens to call the police if Ben doesn't leave. The next morning, Sophie wakes up in a boat with Danny and Jack, while Jack pukes into the ocean. Sophie asks questions that the men won't answer, so Danny tells her they're being taken to Fiji. Eventually, they make it to the island and the men push the teens through the woods until they make it to a behavioral rehabilitation boot camp. They're welcomed by the chief of security Logan and his coordinator team, who puts a sensor on their ankles. If anyone tries to leave the camp perimeter, the sensors will warn security. Swimming to escape is impossible anyway because they're too far away from other land and there are sharks. After all their personal belongings are taken, the three teens are chained to blocks of concrete on the shore. As hours pass, the temperature keeps getting colder. At night, the tide gets higher and the trio keeps getting hit by freezing waves. They hold hands so they can support each other during the process. The following morning, Logan and his team come to unchain them while Arthur repeats a lame inspirational speech as the camp's founder and director. When Jack insults him, Arthur says curse words aren't allowed as he hurts Jack's foot with his cane. He also explains the concrete is a payback because the teens have kept their parents chained to trouble all their lives. Jack notices pit cells in the ground and starts yelling at Arthur, only to be knocked down by security and taken away. When they get closer to the actual camp, Sophie and Danny see that all the campers are put to work. Afterward, a coordinator shows them around while explaining how the camp works. Everyone starts as a black shirt, but they can progress into yellow and later to white like her, who will be going home in 2 months. A white shirt that shows their growth is the only way to leave. While the men give Jack a haircut, Sophie gets her uniform from Trina. Next, Arthur's sister Rhonda gives Sophie a very invasive body cavity search in case she's hiding any substances. In the meantime, Ben meets with Marianne, who asks Ben to stop calling her house. She swears that she's doing this for Sophie's own good, but Ben can tell she's hesitant and explains that since her father's death, Sophie thinks her mother doesn't care. Feeling guilty, Marianne tells him Sophie is at the Serenity Boot Camp in the South Pacific. As days pass, Ben researches the camp while Sophie gets used to the new routine. She has to study and work all day long, gets lousy meals, and at night she has cold showers with bugs running by her feet. The white shirts don't work, they just get better meals and watch over the other teens to make sure they don't steal anything. When a teen misbehaves, they're put in the pit cells in the ground. One day, all the campers sit in a circle inside a tent. Trina is put in the middle with a small microphone on her shirt. Arthur tells everyone to clap in support, then asks Trina why she's here. When she says she doesn't know, a few teens are chosen to surround her and start pushing around while saying all the things she did, like buying happy substances and getting it on with too many guys. Everyone insults Trina with very nasty words until she finally snaps, admitting she had been tired of her parents forcing their religious rules on her. To get back at them, she made a bet with her friends to see who could get the most guys. In one night, she got busy with 8, always wishing one would actually see her since her parents don't. Then Trina falls to her knees, crying as she apologizes. The other teenagers surround her and tell her they love her, but Sophie isn't buying it. Later that night, she hears Trina pray. Early in the morning, Arthur takes them to the beach to meditate and says more motivational words as if that place was actually a mental paradise. Meanwhile, Ben buys some things from a dealer. At home, he stops doing his chores and uses a syringe where his mother can see him. A few days later, the camp is having chicken for dinner, which is very rare. Trina steals a piece and runs outside to eat it in secret, but Logan catches her red-handed. Suddenly, he gets handsy and explains he almost promoted her to a yellow shirt. But this behavior may keep her in black forever. To make her buy a promotion, Logan pushes Trina to her knees and makes her get naughty. The heavy rain becomes a full raging storm and the tents start falling apart, so all the campers have to run out of their beds and look for cover. Rhonda thinks they should help them, but Arthur thinks they should learn to handle themselves. The girls' tent flies off and Sophie runs back in to rescue a frozen Trina. Soon the cables fail and the camp loses power. The next day, Trina is put in charge of the group fixing the tents. And Trina quickly uses her new power to order her friends around. While lifting some heavy wood, Sophie slips on the mud and falls. She feels tired and wants to rest, but Trina keeps yelling at her to get to work. Since Sophie won't obey, Trina gives the other girls permission to grab Sophie by the hair and throw her in the mud, where they kick her and call her a liar. Arthur thinks this is kids reacting to the proper incentive. Later, Arthur has a private talk with Sophie, trying to look nice by offering cookies and milk. He keeps trying to make Sophie snap by poking at her relationship with her parents. But Sophie doesn't fall for it and throws the cookie away. Meanwhile, Ben also arrives at the camp. After a medical examination, he's taken to the boys' tent and Jack starts insulting him. But the group is called to dinner before the situation can escalate. During dinner, Ben sits in front of Sophie, who can't believe what she's seeing. She immediately walks off the table and Ben follows her. While pretending to do the dishes, Ben explains he got in trouble on purpose to be sent here. His injections only had saline water, and he even got a guy to point a gun at him to make his parents believe it. Ben promises they'll escape and steals a fork from the kitchen. The next day, Logan takes all the boys for a run around the island, and when they make it to the shore, he makes them swim. The waves are strong and Danny can't swim well, so he barely survives the experience. Later, after meditation, Arthur announces that Trina gets a yellow shirt. Afterward, Ben hides in the bathroom and starts messing with the sensor using the fork. But unfortunately, a coordinator pounds on the door and tells him to get going. It's been a month since Sophie's arrival, and tonight it's her turn to be in the center of the circle. Since she refuses to talk, 4 teens are quickly called to the middle and they throw Sophie around while insulting her and calling her a liar. This makes her remember how her parents also threw her around after she crashed the party. Eventually, Sophie falls to the floor and the abuse finally makes her crack. It's revealed that during the party she pretended to apologize for her behavior before saying that Carl went to her room every night. In tears, Sophie admits that she lied and apologizes. Afterwards, Sophie sees Trina following Logan into a private spot, but before she can investigate, Ben covers her mouth and takes her to the bushes to tell her he's got a plan to escape. However, Sophie is finally brainwashed and tells him this is where they belong because of their bad behavior. Then she leaves. The next day, Rhonda tells the teens to write a letter pretending to be their parents saying what they'd love to hear. Meanwhile, the boys are playing sports on the beach and Ben accidentally falls past the camp perimeter, activating the sensors. The coordinators immediately turn them off, but Ben gets a better idea of how they work. When the game continues, Ben is aggressively thrown to the ground, so Ben retaliates with a knee to the groin. In the evening, Arthur announces that a boy who has been there 2 years finally gets to leave the camp. He used to be one of the worst cases, so Arthur will take him to his seminar in Los Angeles as an example. After hearing the words of 2 years, Sophie changes her mind and tells Ben they should use his plan while Arthur is away. Afterward, Rhonda reads all the letters to Arthur and finds Sophie's words as her dead father very sweet. Arthur is shaken for a second, but then claims Sophie is writing like that to manipulate him. Rhonda wishes Arthur wouldn't leave the island because she's afraid of possible legal trouble, revealing that campers have died in the past. The next day, Ben messes with the sensor some more and finally finds a way to turn it on and off at will. Late at night after Arthur leaves, Ben sneaks into the girls' tent and makes Sophie follow him out. They run to the perimeter and Ben turns off Sophie's sensor before crossing. The alarm doesn't activate, so they go to Arthur's office and sneak past a sleeping Rhonda to get their personal belongings back. On their way out, Sophie accidentally kicks a bottle of alcohol, but Rhonda is too drunk to wake up. Afterward, they run through the woods and get to the beach from the beginning, where they get in a boat to escape. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Arthur is having his seminar, promoting the camp by showing clips that only show the nice parts like the meditation and taking care of the plants. Ben's parents are there and blame Sophie for his son's sudden change in behavior. Getting suspicious, Arthur sends a text to warn Logan. Back to Sophie and Ben, they start having trouble with the boat, which can't stay afloat on the heavy waves. The boat is overturned and the couple has to swim to the nearest beach. Luckily, this is the island Ben had been trying to reach, which it has a resort for them to stay in. Ben had already sent an envelope in advance with money and documents for their plan. For the next few hours, the couple enjoys their freedom and gets dirty together. Unfortunately, their happiness is interrupted by Logan and his men, who punch Ben before dragging him and Sophie back into their boat. When they return to the camp, both teens are put them in the pit cells while Arthur tells the group nobody will have breakfast or time off for 3 months because they must learn how one person's actions can affect the lives of others. Afterward, it's Dana's turn in the circle, but he never breaks and refuses to take responsibility for his parents' paranoia. The others start beating him up with canes, yet he still doesn't break. He only explains he made a joke about murders on the internet, and his parents believed it. Danny calls Arthur out for believing he's helping the children, so he's knocked down with a punch. Days pass with Ben and Sophie still in the pits, where they have to deal with the burning sun and occasional storms that flood their cells. After 2 weeks, they're finally released. In private, Arthur claims that Ben ruined Sophie's rehabilitation, so he'll be kicked out in 3 days. Until then, Ben must behave or Arthur will make Sophie's life a living hell. Later, while they're working, Ben tries being cold to Sophie, but she insists on talking until he shares Arthur's words. That night, Trina is using her mouth as usual until Logan decides he wants more and forces himself on her. Afterward, a crying Trina runs to the showers and Sophie sees her, so she follows to check on her. At first, Trina doesn't want to talk, but Sophie notices the blood and Trina finally confesses what happened. Sophie hugs her to comfort her the best she can. The next day, Logan sends the boys swimming again even though the waves are more brutal. When Danny starts having trouble, he tries holding onto the boy and calls for help, only to be ignored. After all the other boys come back, Logan tells Danny he needs to return on his own means as well. Ben calls him out and wants to help Danny, but Logan holds him back. Another big wave comes and knocks Danny off the boy, sending him underwater. A desperate Ben finally frees himself and jumps in, swimming as fast as possible to retrieve Danny's body and bring him to the shore. He tries CPR, but it's too late. Danny is dead. Ben blames Logan for it. However, Ben tells his men that Danny died trying to escape and they take the body to the camp. When Arthur learns what happened, he scolds Logan because now the whole camp will be investigated and sued. He threatens to call the army to tell them Logan escaped from them a few years ago, but for now he dismisses him. Afterward, Rhonda tells Arthur he's losing control and the camp is falling apart, so Arthur slaps her. Moments later, the campers watch how Dana's body is taken away in a bag, and Arthur discusses things with a cop. That night, Arthur makes Logan step into the circle, saying the law is the same for everyone. The other teens are afraid of him, so at first they don't dare to do anything. Suddenly, Trina stands up and wonders how many girls he promised yellow shirts to, causing a bunch of girls to stand up to share what Logan did to them. As sticks are passed around, Sophie steps in and calls Logan out for abuse and murder. The other teens start furiously beating Logan up with the sticks, but Sophie stops them because violence proves they belong here. At that moment, Arthur tells them they belong there because their parents gave up on them. So Ben retaliates by revealing that the teens died in Arthur's former camp in New Mexico. He moved the program to a faraway island so the lore couldn't find it. Ben starts a speech about their right to freedom and how Danny died for nothing, riling up the entire group. The teenagers finally snap and begin destroying the whole camp. Logan gets hurt and pushed down, but the other coordinators are tired and only watch it happen. Soon the teens are making torches and lighting all the tents and buildings on fire. So Logan decides to escape on a car before it gets worse. The flames begin spreading and create an enormous fire that fills the area with very dark smoke. When the group sees Logan trying to escape, they throw objects at his car and make him crash right into a building on fire. He gets stuck inside and the gas catches on fire too, causing a small explosion that kills him. Next, Ben and Sophie go into the main building, where Arthur brings out a gun. While Arthur monologues, Jack surprises him from behind and starts beating him up. He almost stabs him in anger, but Ben stops him. Arthur uses the chance to shoot his gun, but nothing happens because Rhonda had removed all the bullets. The teenagers throw Arthur inside a pit for the cops to find later. Then they run around the island to enjoy their new freedom while the censors keep wailing.